I first saw her on the deck of the USS Frontier, stomping through the smoke and broken steel, all 8 feet of glistening terror, and for some reason, I couldn't look away. Sirens wailed overhead, the ship's hull still groaning from the last impact. Crew members scrambled across the wreckage, hauling power conduits back into place, sealing ruptures with plasma welders. I should have been helping. Instead, I stood frozen, my hands still gripping the useless tablet I was supposed to be working from, staring at the monstrous figure that had just boarded through the ruptured side hatch. Vakara. Even without knowing her name, anyone could tell she wasn't one of ours. Her skin shimmered like molten obsidian under the emergency lights. Muscles, coiled under an armored exoskeleton that looked too organic to be mechanical. Thick braids of hair hung down her back, each one tipped with what looked like small, wicked barbs. Her mouth, when it opened, revealed rows of gleaming, pointed teeth. Not quite a smile, not quite a threat. Something far worse. Interest. The Kais. Drevik were a nightmare whispered about in interstellar bars and late-night briefing rooms. We hadn't fought a full war with them yet. God knew we'd lose. But we'd had enough ugly misunderstandings to know they didn't play fair. Or soft. Drevik weren't ambassadors. They weren't negotiators. They were conquerors. And yet here she was. Officially, she'd come under peaceful diplomatic terms, whatever that meant when your boots left dents in titanium flooring. Most of the crew flinched at her approach, pretending to busy themselves with whatever maintenance or triage excuse they could come up with. A few outright fled, disappearing into airlocks and crew tunnels. Even the Marines stationed at the end of the deck looked rattled, fingers twitching on the triggers of weapons they knew damn well wouldn't do a thing. I don't know why I didn't move. Maybe it was stupidity. Maybe it was fascination. Maybe it was the look in her eyes when she finally turned to me. She looked straight at me. It wasn't a glance. It wasn't the casual sweep of someone assessing threats or resources. It was a deliberate, unblinking stare, molten gold irises locking onto mine with a heat I felt in my chest, my spine, the soles of my boots. For a heartbeat, it was just the two of us in the wreckage, two creatures who should never have crossed paths, recognizing something in each other. I swallowed hard, but I didn't look away. Her mouth twitched at the corner, the slightest tilt upward, a smirk. Then she turned her massive frame toward the command bridge without another word, her braided hair whipping behind her like a living weapon. The captain's voice barked orders over the comms, shaking me out of whatever spell I'd fallen into. All personnel, return to assigned stations. Priority Alpha, diplomatic escort protocols active. Right, diplomatic escort. Somehow, we were supposed to host this monster aboard our ship like she was some pampered senator. I forced my legs to move, following the others into the service corridors where we could pretend we were just fixing things, pretend we hadn't just been invaded under the pretense of diplomacy. My tablet flickered, half the data corrupted from the last hit we took. I barely noticed. All I could see was her, Vakara, burned into my vision like an afterimage from staring into a star. The whisper started before I even reached my assigned sector. Did you see her? God, she's bigger than the Spec Ops. Exosuits. Those teeth, I heard she cracked the boarding ramp just walking up it. Fear. Pure animal fear. No one said it out loud, but you could feel it, thick as oil in the recycled air. I tapped into the internal comms, requesting new orders. The reply came almost instantly. Engineer Rhodes, report to Bay 3. Diplomatic liaison support. Immediate. I stared at the blinking cursor for a second too long. Bay 3. That was where Vakara had been escorted. Support. Liaison. They were sending me to her. A cold weight settled into my gut, but there was another feeling under it too. Something I couldn't name yet. Excitement. Maybe. Curiosity. The kind of curiosity that made humans poke ancient bear caves with sticks just to see what would happen. The kind that got people killed. I tucked the tablet under my arm and headed toward Bay 3, the path strangely clear. Like everyone else knew better than to be anywhere near her. The closer I got, the heavier the silence became. Even the ship seemed to hum more cautiously, the life support systems a little quieter, the ventilation fans a little more hesitant. As if the frontier itself was holding its breath. I turned the last corner and saw her again, standing alone in the center of the bay. No guards, no advisors, just her. Vakara stood with her arms crossed over her chest, her massive body dwarfing the human-sized furnishings around her. Her gaze drifted lazily over the few crew members scuttling at the edges of the room, until it caught me again. I swear she smiled. Not a kind smile, not a comforting one. A smile like a wolf watching a rabbit pretend it wasn't terrified. My boots felt glued to the floor. Her voice rumbled out across the bay, low and rich, curling around me like smoke. "You are not afraid," she said. It wasn't a question, and somehow standing there with my heart hammering in my throat, I realized she was right. I wasn't. I lifted my chin, stepped forward into the thick silence, and said the first thing that came. "To mind? No, should I be?" Her laughter was like thunder cracking across the deck plates, and just like that, I knew, whatever was about to happen between us, it wasn't going to be diplomatic. The next few days blurred into one long, surreal fever dream. My orders were clear. Assist Vakara in cultural and operational integration. Basically, babysit the 8-foot alien warrior and make sure she didn't rip anyone's head off by accident or on purpose. It sounded official when you said it fast. In reality, it meant I was alone with her more often than any sane man should have been. The first time I got close enough to actually touch her, it was by accident. We were in the ship's arboretum, a patch of engineered greenery meant to keep the crew from losing their minds during long deployments. She was examining a Terran oak tree, her clawed fingers tracing the bark like she was reading it. I reached past her to grab a maintenance scanner from the shelf. My hand brushed her side. It was like touching a live wire. Her body heat was intense, radiating through the thin layer of ship-standard clothing she wore. Not armor, something softer. Flexible but no less dangerous looking. Vakara turned her head slowly, regarding me with a gaze that felt like it pinned me against the wall. "You are bold," she said, her voice a low purr. I muttered something about the scanner, trying to sound casual, trying not to notice how close we were standing, how I had to tilt my head up to meet her eyes. She smiled then, a slow, lazy smile that showed just enough of her sharp teeth to make my blood pump a little harder. After that, the tension between us was never far away. It clung to the edges of every interaction. A brush of her hand against mine when passing tools, a nudge of her hip when we maneuvered through narrow maintenance tunnels, a casual lean-in closer than necessary when she asked questions about human systems, her breath stirring the tiny hairs on the back of my neck. It was maddening. I should have stopped it, should have said something, should have remembered the tiny diamond waiting for me back on Earth, sitting in a box next to my fiancé's picture. Aaron. Beautiful, smart Aaron, who had waited through deployments before. Aaron who trusted me to come back whole. I thought about her. I really did. But thinking about her felt like trying to hold on to a fading transmission through a broken comms relay. Distant, crackling, fading more every time Vakara looked at me with that barely restrained hunger smoldering in her eyes. It wasn't just physical. It was something deeper. The way she listened when I talked about Earth, about the endless blue skies, about thunderstorms and oceans and all the chaotic, ridiculous things humans did just because they could. The way she laughed, an actual, delighted laugh. When I told her about trying to surf and wiping out so hard I dislocated my shoulder, she liked it. The chaos, the unpredictability. She liked me and I was helpless against it. The moment it crossed the line wasn't in the arboretum, or during the endless system checks, or even in the cramped mess hall where her presence cleared entire tables. No, it happened somewhere much less dignified. A maintenance corridor, Deck 7. Just past midnight ship time, we were doing a diagnostic on the grav generators. Routine, boring work. At least it should have been. Vakara was crouched beside an access panel, her body so large she filled the whole corridor. I was squeezed between the opposite wall and her shoulder, trying to feed a calibration cable through the mess of conduits. It was stupidly cramped, uncomfortable, or at least it would have been if I hadn't been so hyper-aware of every place our bodies almost touched. She shifted slightly, brushing against me, and the air crackled between us. I felt her turn her head, felt her gaze burning into the side of my face. "Human," she said, her voice pitched low, intimate. I turned, and she was already leaning in. Her breath hit my ear, hot and deliberate, her lips not touching but so close I could feel the shape of her words. "You smell like storms." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every instinct screamed to run, to pull away, to remember who I was, what promises I had made. But I didn't move. Vakara shifted again, this time deliberately pressing her body against mine, pinning me lightly against the wall. Not hard, not enough to hurt. Just enough to make it clear I wasn't going anywhere unless she let me. One of her massive hands came up, claws gleaming faintly under the emergency lights. Slowly, she traced a line along my jaw with the tip of one curved claw. So gently, it almost tickled. So slowly it made my skin crawl in the best possible way. My heart thundered in my chest. I could have pulled away. Should have. But when she brushed her claws against my jawline, I didn't pull away, and God help me, she knew it. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of half-finished duties and half-meant excuses. On paper, I was still fulfilling my orders, guiding Vakara through ship operations, translating human systems, ensuring diplomatic success. In practice, we were orbiting each other in tighter and tighter circles, the unspoken thing between us growing heavier by the minute. I tried to keep my distance. I really did. I'd find reasons to leave her with junior officers, to reroute assignments so someone else could handle her check-ins. I'd bury myself in engine maintenance, pretending I didn't feel the phantom pressure of her hands on my skin, the burn of her gaze from across the bay. But she didn't let me go. She would show up when I was least expecting it. At the mess, in the engine rooms, even outside my temporary quarters. She never asked permission. She just appeared, a living gravity well I couldn't escape. Every time she'd stand there a little too close, her massive frame dwarfing the corridor, and just watch me, like a predator amused by how long its prey thought it could keep running. And every time my resolve slipped a little more. The tipping point came during another midnight maintenance check, this time on the secondary life support array. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels wrong on a ship. Most of the crew was asleep or hiding from their own demons. I was alone in the generator room when I heard the door slide open. I didn't even have to look. I knew it was her. Vakara stepped inside, moving with that deceptively fluid grace that made her seem like part of the shadows themselves. She didn't say anything. Didn't need to. I straightened up from the console, heart pounding, every nerve, ending on fire. She stalked toward me, slow and deliberate, a hunter closing the final distance. I backed up instinctively until my spine hit the wall behind me. She kept coming, stopped inches away. I could feel the heat rolling off her in waves. Could see every glint of the sharp lines on her body, the gleam in her golden eyes. My voice cracked when I finally spoke. "We shouldn't." A low rumble vibrated in her chest, something between a laugh and a growl. "But you want to." It wasn't a question. She lifted one massive hand, slow enough that I could have ducked away if I wanted, brushed her knuckles along my collarbone, down the center of my chest. So light it felt more like a ghost touch than something real. "You humans," she murmured, voice a rough whisper. "So fragile. So brave." Her other hand came up, pinning my wrist gently against the wall. Not enough to hurt. Just enough to tell me she could if she wanted to. Her face was so close I could feel every word on my skin. "Say no," she breathed, "and I will walk away." I opened my mouth. No words came out. Instead, I leaned into her. And that was it. The dam broke. She crushed her mouth to mine in a kiss that was more war cry than romance, fierce and possessive and almost painfully hot. Her claws scraped lightly along my sides as she hauled me against her body, the difference in size and strength, leaving no doubt about who was in control. But I didn't feel small. I felt invincible, like touching something bigger than life itself. We tore at each other in the dim light, all heat and desperation, the whole room shrinking down to just the points where our bodies touched, where her hands claimed me, where my fingers sank into the unforgiving planes of her back. At some point, I ended up on the maintenance console, her massive frame looming over mine. She was careful, surprisingly careful, but there was no mistaking the hunger in her, the way she devoured every gasp, every shudder, every surrender. When it was over, we stayed tangled together, breathing hard. For a long moment, there was only the hum of the ship and the sound of our hearts pounding against each other. Vakara tilted her head down, brushing her forehead against mine in a strangely tender gesture. "Your storm," she murmured. "It is mine now." I should have felt guilt, regret, some shred of decency. Instead, all I felt was hers, and somehow that terrified me more than anything else. It didn't take long for the hammer to fall. I don't know who saw us. Maybe the security logs caught the unauthorized access to Deck 7, or maybe someone heard the noises we weren't exactly quiet about. Either way, it didn't stay a secret for long. The summons came less than a day later. First, a terse message blinking on my comms unit. "Report to Deck 1, Command Tribunal, immediate." I knew it was bad the moment I saw the full assembly, senior officers standing stiff-backed behind the Admiral's bench, civilian diplomats looking like they'd bitten into something rotten, and behind them, looming like the final nail in my coffin, representatives from the Dravek delegation, and Vakara. She stood at the far end of the room, chained, not because she couldn't break them if she wanted to, but because it was about appearances, about control. I met her gaze across the chamber, and she gave me the smallest nod. She wasn't ashamed. Neither was I. The tribunal started with Admiral Carrick reading a litany of charges: breach of diplomatic protocol, violation of interspecies contact regulations, conduct unbecoming an officer, and about a dozen other words designed to sound cold and official instead of what it really was: a witch hunt. Then came the Dravek envoy. He stepped forward, armor gleaming, his voice sharp enough to cut steel. "Vakara of the Dravek Honor Guard has engaged in unauthorized physical intimacy with a lesser being," he said, spitting the words like poison. "Such dishonor requires immediate disciplinary action. If not satisfied, the Dravek will reconsider our terms of alliance with humanity." Gasps rippled through the human delegation. Alliance with the Dravek meant survival for some frontier worlds, shared technology, shared defense pacts. This wasn't just about me, it was about politics, power. The Admiral's eyes flicked to me hard and cold. "Lieutenant," he said, voice low and dangerous, "do you deny these allegations?" I could have lied, could have spun it somehow, claimed coercion, misunderstanding, anything to save my career, to salvage what little dignity they'd allow. But I didn't. I straightened my shoulders and spoke clearly, my voice carrying through the chamber. "I don't deny a damn thing." Murmurs exploded around the room, humans and Dravek alike. I knew exactly what I was doing, I said louder now. "I wasn't coerced, I wasn't manipulated. I chose her." Dead silence. Behind me, someone sucked in a sharp breath. "I don't regret it," I added, locking eyes with Vakara across the room, "and I won't apologize for it either." For a moment, the tribunal seemed frozen, and then Vakara moved. With a snarl that shook the bulkheads, she snapped the ornamental chains binding her wrists and strode forward, ignoring the shouted protests from both sides. She stopped beside me, towering over the human officers. When she spoke, it wasn't in Dravek dialect. It was in perfect, crisp English, something none of them expected. "This human has honor," she said, voice ringing through the chamber like a war drum. "He stands for his heart without fear. You call him lesser. I call him equal." Stunned silence. Turned to look at her, my chest so full I thought it might break open. The tribunal didn't know what to do, Breaking alliance by dishonoring a Dravek champion was unthinkable. But letting a human-alien scandal continue without punishment was equally dangerous politically. So they chose the coward's way out. Exile. The verdict came swiftly. I was stripped of my commission, my service record sealed. Vakara was repatriated, back to her people, which in diplomatic speak meant she was cast out, too dangerous and too stubborn to be useful anymore. We were both given 48 hours to leave the ship, separately. The Dravek wanted her back. Earth wanted me forgotten. But neither of us was going back to the lives they thought they could shove us into, not after what we'd found. That night, before the final departure orders were processed, a private comm pinged in my quarters. It was Erin. I stared at the hologram of her face, beautiful, heartbroken, furious. I saw the tribunal feed, she said, voice cracking. I don't even know who you are anymore. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't, she snapped. Just don't. You made your choice. The feed cut out before I could say another word. I sat there. For a long time, the silence of the room pressing down on me, mourning what I'd lost, knowing I'd do it all over again if it meant feeling what I'd felt when Vakara touched me. When morning came, I met Vakara by the lower hangars. She wore a makeshift jacket draped over her broad shoulders, the human insignia still emblazoned faintly across the fabric. She looked at me the way she always did, like I was something rare and precious, and she wasn't going to let anyone take it away from her. We have nothing left, I said quietly. Wrong, she rumbled. She extended her hand. We have each other. I stepped into her shadow without hesitation, sliding my hand into hers. Together, we boarded a junker freighter, barely spaceworthy, and punched out of orbit before anyone could second-guess the decision. Stars wheeled around us as we broke into deep space, the unknown stretching out ahead. I glanced over at her, at the impossible, infuriating, magnificent alien woman who had destroyed my life and saved it all in the same breath. They can exile us to the farthest edges of the galaxy for all I care, I said, grinning as the stars blurred past, because wherever she is, that's home to me.